We've all heard of the famous recording studios like EMI's Abbey Road, Olympic Studios, Sound City, but did you know there's one studio that recorded some of the biggest hits of the early 1970s by bands like the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, The Who, and Deep Purple? And that studio was used in such exotic locations as castles in England, luxury hotels in Switzerland, and the French Riviera? Well, how would that be possible? Stay tuned to find out. Hello, and welcome to If Guitars Could Speak, the YouTube documentary series where we examine famous musicians, awesome pieces of gear, and interesting moments from rock history. Today, we have a very special episode in store for you as we examine the ultimate road warrior of the late 60s and 70s, the mighty Mobile, known as the Rolling Stones Mobile Studio. State-of-the-art for its time, yet constantly in motion, the RSM saw some amazing music run through its boards. So buckle your seatbelt and enjoy the ride as we examine this amazing piece of rock and roll history. As always, please don't forget to subscribe to the Guitar Historian channel to see more content like this, and be sure to hit the thumbs up button below to let YouTube know that you think more music history fans would like to see this video. Now, without further ado, let's look at the road warrior, the Rolling Stones Mobile Studio. The 1960s were a hotbed of recorded music, with countless bands springing up in the rock and roll revolution that had been ignited by the founding fathers like Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and Buddy Holly, and then cemented by monster pop acts like the Beatles. The age of the recording studio as a big business was born, and bands from all over the world flocked to them to try to catch their big break. But as the 60s wore on, many huge rock acts that had followed the Beatles around the world on the British invasion were growing weary of the structured and rigid rules of the recording studios of the time. First, most studios had regular business hours of 9 to 5. Then, they would book as many bands as possible to maximize their profits, causing the bands to often rush things and produce music that was less than their ultimate vision. Finally, the studios didn't come to you. You had to haul all of your equipment and personnel to it, and then haul it all out when you were done. Very few bands had the arrangement that a band like the Beatles had at Abbey Road, with unlimited time and unlimited resources. And so it was that the Rolling Stones had an idea. In 1968, the band was recording their album Beggar's Banquet at Olympic Studios, and were growing tired of the short hours and cold, sterile environment. Around the same time, Mick Jagger had purchased a massive country home in Newbury, south of England, called Stargroves, and wondered if they could move their equipment to the compound to finish the album in more relative comfort. As they continued recording at Olympic, it was the Stones' road manager and pianist Ian Stewart who would have the light bulb idea of putting the whole thing on wheels. He dreamed up a concept where the control room and mixing board would be put on a large truck, making the entire production studio mobile. The band could then run wiring outside to the board wherever they were, even if they were recording a live album. The idea caught fire, and with Stewart in the lead managing the project, they began to make it happen. Stewart would consult with legendary engineer Glyn Johns to bring the idea of the mobile studio to fruition. They would purchase a Helios recording board, which was top of the line for the time, and have the interior acoustic and soundproofing work done by Sandy Brown. The interior dimensions, when complete, would be 8 feet by 22 feet and 9 feet tall. The outside of the van was painted in a U.S. Army camouflage paint style. The studio would be placed on the chassis of a BMC, or British Motor Corporation, heavy-duty layered truck, with a simple RSM for Rolling Stones Mobile Studio added above the large BMC letters above the front grille. Producers would enter through doors in the back to a fully air-conditioned studio, complete with an 8-track recording board and 20 available inputs. Shortly, this would be upgraded to a 16-track board. Initially, the Stones would use the mighty Mobile for their own use, famously using it to record their 1969 Hyde Park concert and then their seminal 1971 album, Sticky Fingers. As they continued to refine and perfect the studio, they would enjoy the freedom afforded by the ability to record anytime. However, word quickly would spread of the Stones' recording revolution, and many of their friends started to buzz about the band's ability to record whenever and wherever they pleased. The first band to heavily utilize the studio after the Stones was Led Zeppelin, who wanted to escape the studio confines to record their third album. They would record most of it at Headley Grange, a country home rented by Page for the specific purpose of recording off the grid. After the Stones recorded Sticky Fingers at Jagger's Stargroves, they would borrow the unit again to record their seminal 1971 album, Led Zeppelin IV. It was around this time that the Stones and Ian Stewart had the idea of renting the studio out at £1,000 a week, engineering crew included. The RSM could be brought to any location the band wished and utilized for as long as needed, as long as they could pay. The Who would use the mobile to record the sessions that became their most famous live album, Live at Leeds in February of 1970, and then record the greatest song of their greatest album, Won't Get Fooled Again, on Who's Next in 1971 at Stargroves. The Faces and Ronnie Lane would record some of their album Long Player at Stargroves on the mobile, giving Lane the idea to open his own mobile studio, which he called the LMS. This would become a competitor to the Rolling Stones unit throughout the 70s. The Stones would then take the RSM to the French Riviera to record their greatest album, Exile on Main Street, in 1972. Following this, the mobile would be taken to Switzerland for arguably its most famous use, one that would immortalize the RSM in the song Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple. Intending to record at the Montreux Casino, it would be burned down in the middle of a Frank Zappa concert before they could utilize it. But for more on this story, check out the GH Shorts video above. As the 1970s rolled on, so did the mighty mobile. Recording such acts as Neil Young, who recorded some of his album Harvest on it. Fleetwood Mac would record 2 mid-70s post-Peter Green, pre-Buckingham Nicks albums on it. When Bob Marley played his seminal show at the Lyceum Theatre in London, the mobile was there, producing the single for his 1975 live version of No Woman, No Cry. The interior of the RSM would be rebuilt with the help of Dolby Studios, Altec, and Eddie Veal, and the price per week would be raised to £1,500. In an ad placed in an industry rag, the studio would post previous clients not already mentioned like Paul McCartney, Traffic, Paul Simon, Santana, Black Sabbath, and Jeff Beck. It would even be used to record performances by the Russian Ballet, ABBA, Whitesnake. The client list just kept growing and growing. After the old BSM chassis had logged over 160,000 miles across Europe, the RSM would be placed on an entirely new chassis in the early 80s. This time a Dutch DAF 1600 turbo with an air ride suspension to protect the equipment. The screen-printed Stones tongue logo would be added to the front above the windscreen. The mobile became so lucrative and popular that the Stones ceased using it later in the 70s as it became harder and harder to muscle other bands out from using it. The use of the mobile had become a bona fide cottage industry, with no detail being left unexplored. For instance, Stewart had to figure out how to ensure that the board and equipment inside the studio would survive a long trip to begin with. In 1973, Mike McKenna would become the main caretaker of the mobile, and he said, "The thing has to be put together in such a way that it will travel. For instance, where you've got a mixer with lots of rigid PC boards tied to the frame, possibly an inline mixer. You've got to be very careful that you don't get structural twists in the desk that will put everything completely out of line. You've got to make sure that everything is tied down very well." The 1980s would see the client list continue to grow with acts like Dire Straits, Buddy Rich, and Level 42 making use of it. But as the need for the RSM started to slow down, Stones bassist Bill Wyman would repurpose its use to forward his charitable work in his AIMS project, standing for Ambition, Invention, Motivation, Success, that would help new, unsigned rock bands find exposure through demo recordings in the RSM. It would be painted a dark blue with a yellow The AIMS Project painted across the sides. Some of the bands would then go on to a final celebratory show at the Royal Albert Hall in February of 1988. Amazingly, the RSM would return to the recording marketplace later in the 80s and early 90s, culminating in a final use by the original owners to record Mick's brother Chris Jagger's band Atcha. The Mighty Mobile would be sold to a New York studio called Yoho in 1996, and after some refurbishing would be used to record bands in the underground music scene, including the Ramones and Patti Smith, as well as 30 other bands for the compilation album Best of NYC Hardcore. The unit was then put into storage for some years before it was rediscovered by Canada's National Music Centre and moved to Calgary, Alberta, where it continues to stand on display in their Studio Bell. The long story of the Rolling Stones Mobile Studio is absolutely incredible when you simply name some of the songs that this mighty rolling powerhouse recorded. Brown Sugar, Stairway to Heaven, Won't Get Fooled Again, Smoke on the Water, Tumbling Dice, Kashmir, No Woman, No Cry. Its ability to give bands the creative freedom that they desperately craved caused a seismic shift in their ability to produce their artistic vision as they saw fit. Considering its clear contribution to the fabric of rock and roll, especially a period in which rock was growing up, it's time to celebrate the maestro of miles, the roadrunner extraordinaire that is the Rolling Stones Mobile Studio. That's another episode of If Guitars Could Speak. If you like this video, please don't hesitate to hit that thumbs up button below, and be sure to subscribe to the Guitar Historian channel and click the bell icon to get notifications whenever we post a new video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.